Welcome everyone to this Eurogypsum webinar dedicated to circularity in construction, coinciding with the 5th European Gypsum Recyclers Forum. This online event is organized with the support of Ruud Petersen. My name is Tristan Suffis. I'm heading the Eurogypsum office in Brussels, and I'm pleased to welcome all speakers and live viewers today, 26th of May, 2021, as well as all those who will be watching this recorded video in the future. First, let me say just a few words about Eurogypsum. We're an organization representing the gypsum, plaster, plasterboard product sector. Our members supply gypsum, a mineral which is endlessly recyclable. Out of this raw material, our members manufacture lightweight products, such as plasterboard or plaster, which are incorporated into walls, ceilings, and other systems for buildings. They protect homes and offices from fire, they keep our rooms healthy and tempered, they provide acoustic comfort, and they contribute to efficient, adaptable, and sustainable buildings. Gypsum being a mineral that is circular by nature, we have been involved in various initiatives around the circular economy at EU level, but most importantly on the ground by encouraging our members and partners to promote the actual recycling of gypsum and the overall circularity agenda in the production. Following a major project called Gypsum to Gypsum, founded until 2015 under the EU Life Plus program, and involving the whole gypsum recycling chain and the academic world, we have maintained a dialogue with the whole supply chain via the European Gypsum Recyclers Forum, inviting partners from EU institutions and other organizations to interact. Today is the 5th edition and the first online forum. Now I'm happy to hand over the floor to our moderator for today's webinar, Chris Davies. For those who don't know Chris, he's a long-standing former member of the European Parliament's Environment Committee, and he's now a senior advisor to Ruud Petersen Public Affairs in Brussels. Chris has actually witnessed the birth of Europe's circular economy policy, so I'm particularly pleased to have him today as our moderator. Chris, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Tristan, and thank you, Eurogypsum, for hosting this. I may say it's a great pleasure on my part to have the opportunity to chair this. I find the subject really interesting. After 15 and more years on the European Parliament's Environment Committee, I cannot but think how I would look at this issue when the European Commission comes forward with specific proposals, timetables and targets, and how they might be amended by parliamentarians, perhaps made more ambitious. And indeed, I remember, I think it must be just 10 years when I first heard the words circular economy from the mouth of the then European Environment Commissioner, Janusz Potecznik. We're making progress, but perhaps not making progress as fast as many of us would like. Now, a few housekeepings. You will have the opportunity to ask questions. I'm not sure to what extent I'll be able to name you individually, but if you'd like to use the chat box on this screen to ask a question, please do. I'll be trying to follow conversations on the chat screen and feed in questions when we get to the panel discussion. Also, we're going to have a poll just to find out who's watching this webinar. Inevitably, people will log on late, so it won't be completely representative. But a poll is going to be put on the screen just to allow you to say what country you may be coming from, what organization you represent and position and the like, just to give us an idea of our audience. Now, I'm going to hand over to Duncan. I think he's put it on the screen. Duncan is our guru working behind the scenes to ensure this works technically smoothly. So there is a poll on the screen. It says here that the host cannot vote. Okay. I'm assuming that you can by moving the cursor and doing so. I'm assuming that's going to be left on the screen for a while, and there's more than one page. And indeed, here was the second page. And do we have one more?
They're just the results, Chris.
Oh, very well. Okay, so not surprisingly, we have a significant number of people from Western Europe. Oh, it's an interesting spread. I think you agree. Perhaps Italy is not hugely represented. And we don't seem to have anyone from Cyprus. Pity, I was going to make reference to Cyprus later on, or indeed to the Eastern European nations. Interesting. That's in fact, I hope you agree. That's in terms of the, and Tristan, I hope, is looking at that too and thinking, you know, the work. If Eurogypsum is a genuine European organisation, it has some. It has to increase its emphasis and its promotional abilities in some parts of the continent, some parts of the European Union. Thank you very much. Hope you've all taken that into account. Right, okay, so let's get on with the show. I was looking at the Eurogypsum website, and it points out, of course, that gypsum has been used in construction purposes for, best part of 10,000 years, first noted in 8,000 BC, and that's just on what the archaeologists have come up with so far. That plasterboard has been commercially available for 120 years. And above all, and this should really please the European Commission, the beauty of gypsum, it says, is sustainability. It can be endlessly recycled. So let me hand over now to Javier Meyer, the leader of the Eurogypsum working group on the circular economy, also from Saint-Gobain Group. Are we living up to that commitment to try and achieve sustainability and demonstrate that gypsum genuinely is endlessly recyclable? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and good morning, everybody. So let's make a state of play and circularity in the gypsum supply chain in Europe. As you may know, and as it has been already said, the industry is committed to promote a sustainable management of resources, and gypsum recycling is a crucial part thereof. And as you also may know, gypsum can be deconstructed, reprocessed, and reused in buildings forever. Which is one of the beauties, as you said, Chris, of this material. Many countries in Europe have developed already a robust closed-loop recycling stream for the gypsum waste, but as we will see, still many challenges have to be faced on this field. So next slide, please, Duncan. So next slide again. Thank you. So here, the figures on the graph show the evolution of the recycled gypsum coming from construction or demolition waste used in the wallboard industry. These figures come from a questionnaire now yearly addressed to the Eurogypsum members. On the right side, the European map shows with a color code the range of recycled content per country. This range comes from estimations provided by the industry. So what are the main comments we can make from these two graphs? First, around 600,000 tons of recycled gypsum have been used by the plasterboard industry in 2019, showing a very low progress compared to the previous years, unfortunately. This figure has to be put in perspective of the total potential accessible volume of construction and demolition gypsum waste in Europe. This volume is estimated to around 2.5 million tons just for the construction waste, which is the waste generated during the installation of the products. And we have no access, in fact, for the gypsum waste coming for the figures of gypsum waste coming from demolition or renovation projects. But so you can see that 600,000 tons above a total of more than 3 or 4 million tons still represents, let's say, quite a small portion. And last but not least, we are observing, and this is clear on the map, we are observing strong discrepancies between European member states, with the Nordic countries clearly leading the way with an average recycled content of above 10%. So next slide, Duncan, please. So we see that still a big portion of the gypsum waste from the construction remains unrecycled in Europe. So let's try to understand the factors of success, or on the contrary, the factors of or the barriers on the circular gypsum model. If we look at the situation in the Nordics and some other advanced countries, the key drivers for circular model on gypsum have to be found in first, the competitive cost of the recycled material versus the virgin raw material, which is always the key element to consider first when looking at a circular model rather than linear models. Secondly, the advanced culture of these countries on circular economy, which means a strong demand of the construction market, as well as national local regulations favoring notably high recycled content in the products and waste recovery on the job sites. Third point, the practices on site regarding early sorting, often thanks to financial incentives for the actors, again favor good quality material for recycling. And last but not least, also to be noticed, a pragmatic way to manage the risk of the presence of asbestos traces on the recycled gypsum, which is a topic which come again in the second panel, setting realistic thresholds, which again help for approaching circularity on gypsum. And however, at the same time, the industry also has to face technical barriers to high recycled content, and notably the presence of residual paper in the recycled gypsum and the presence of mineral and hydrophobic particles in this recycled gypsum. And for the industry, it is important to know that using recycled gypsum rather than virgin rock requires some investment in order to make process adaptations, and also to avoid process instabilities, and also leads to higher energy usage and more maintenance on the installations, on the equipment, which impact, of course, the final cost of the products. And so again, this is why competitiveness is really key for the recycled material. Next slide. Now, when looking at the European countries where gypsum recycling practices remain poor, we can what can be observed? Different points. First, disposal routes are cheaper and easier than recycling routes. Which means that the cost of the landfill waste remains too cheap to favor alternative circular streams. Circular economy regulations are not at the top of the priorities in these countries, and we also have a low market demand. When I say low market demand, low demand from the construction market for sustainable solutions. In these countries, also, demolition is strongly predominant versus deconstruction, and there is a lack of early early stage sorting, which means leading to poor quality for the recycled material. And again, this is not favoring circular practices. In some countries also, the easy access to cheap FGD gypsum, which is the synthetic gypsum coming from the coal-fired power stations, it can also represent a barrier for the emergence of a circular model. And last but not least, there is a lack of traceability and transparency very often, which leads to stakeholders' lack of confidence. So some key takeaways were analyzing the global situation. I will say first, fostering the economic competitiveness of recycling routes is clearly one of the key parameters to consider. Then also it's important to have an harmonized waste legislation across Europe, because we see that there are still strong discrepancies between the different member states. And there is a need to push for more deconstruction versus demolition, to push for systematic waste diagnosis prior to deconstruction, and to push for more early sorting on the job sites, everything going to favor circularity, because it will favor the good quality for the material, and good quality is key for the different actors in order to have a robust, consistent, and let's say sustainable recycling model for all the different actors. Next slide. Okay, so I will give the floor for Flavia, I think, except if there are immediately some questions.
Yeah, well, we'll take a couple of questions if we may, Xavier. Thank you very much. And clearly, I think you're already indicating that there's a role here for the European Commission in proposing regulatory targets, I think, to level up. There's obviously also a great difference between different member states, and that will affect the cost as well as the regulatory environment, access to the materials, for example. Just touching on a couple of questions that come in about the contamination. Now, can the contamination be reduced to acceptable limits, for example, by mixing the potentially contaminated materials with asbestos or whatever with the gypsum from flue gas desulfurization plants at coal power stations? Is there an acceptable level of contamination?
No, not at all. We can't mix. You know, when talking about hazardous waste or hazardous substances, we can mix substances in order to reduce the content of these hazardous substances. These hazardous substances have to be really completely removed. We can't just dilute these hazardous substances.
Okay. And similarly, I mean, coal power stations, of course, are reducing in number rapidly. So, I mean, to what extent is the industry currently dependent upon the gypsum that comes from those desulfurization plants?
It depends about the countries. As you say, in some countries, this access to this material has been strongly reduced. For instance, in UK, some years ago, we used to have still several coal-fired power stations where, from which we could extract and use the gypsum. Now all these coal-fired power stations are almost closed. So, but there are still some of these power stations in Germany, in Poland, in some other Eastern European countries.
But does the phase out of coal power stations give a greater incentive to make use of recycled materials, or is the virgin gypsum in such plentiful supply that it really doesn't affect the cost equation at all?
Again, this has to be considered country per country. In some countries, you have an access to a cheap gypsum rock, so natural virgin gypsum rock, like in Spain, for instance, which is not favoring the usage of recycled material because virgin rock is so cheap. On the contrary, in some other countries, the access to gypsum rock is difficult. There are not so much quarries, for instance, and if or because there is a lack of synthetic gypsum coming from a coal-fired power station, then it can be a good way to switch to recycled gypsum rather than to a virgin rock, because again, the virgin rock is not accessible locally.
Thanks very much. We'll come back to you if we may. Fulvia, can we, and Duncan, can we move now to Fulvia? Fulvia Rappaeli, who's the head of unit responsible for construction and its part in the circular economy in DG GROW of the European Commission. So, I mean, just listening to that presentation, it just seems to me so obvious that EU regulation here is can be a driving force to persuade member states to introduce the measures at a local level, national level, that can make all the difference. Because it seems that even the proportion of gypsum, of plasterboard that is being recycled, even in the best state, is not great, and in some countries it's hardly taking place at all, despite the fact technically it's perfectly feasible. So what you do over the next couple of years is crucial.
Good morning, and thank you, Chris. Thank you to Eurogypsum for organizing this webinar today, which is very much welcomed, of course. The construction ecosystem is in all our conversation today. There's a lot of focus on the importance of this very crucial ecosystem to ensure the achievement of the carbon neutrality objectives that we have set for 2050. If we don't get the green transition right into the construction ecosystem, most probably we will not achieve the overall objective for climate neutrality. As simple as that. So we do have a big responsibility in working together at all levels, at the European level, of course, at national level, but also at each one company's level, to face these challenges and to seize the opportunities also that comes out from them. The construction ecosystem, as of today, it requires an enormous amount of resources, of course, and it accounts for about 50% of all extracted material. And the construction sector is responsible for over 35% of the EU total waste generation. That says alone, I mean, how much there is still to be done. And we have started, of course, putting in place policies that look at the demand side. And these are, of course, the renovation wave, but also the resilience and recovery funds that are identifying the renovation of buildings as a priority to ensure indeed the achievement of the climate objective, but also to create growth and jobs in Europe. But focus a lot on the energy efficiency on buildings, while we know actually that the material we're going to use for that to happen, the construction front that we're going to integrate in the construction works are as fundamental as actually the energy performance of the building itself. And today, of course, I'm speaking to you, Eurogypsum community, which is active a bit all across the life cycle of a building, and it's a very important step. We need to focus. This concept of life cycle approach is really crucial here, because consideration about the environmental impact, but also the competitiveness of reducing the environmental impact are crucial at all stages of life. Of course, at the time of the manufacturing the process, the product itself at the beginning, you mentioned the impact related to the extraction of rocks that can be certainly reduced, but also the use of energies at the beginning of the process. This is very important, of course, to be considered from the beginning. And we are actually through also the revision of the construction product regulation, looking at ways to make it more visible the sustainability performances of the construction product itself, also to make it them comparable when coming to the design phase. So we are looking into the revision of the construction product regulation. We're still on time to deliver the revised proposal by the end of the year, and we are taking very seriously the idea of including sustainability criteria, possibly even going into mandatory inclusion of those in all construction product standards to really increase the pressure on the stage of manufacturing the products, but also to reward the ones that are making efforts, for instance, including bigger quantities of recycled material in the original construction product. And then, of course, we go at the time at the step of designing the buildings, where also by making clear the information about the difference between different products, different construction products, we support the designers, the architect, but also the owners in uptaking more sustainable materials when thinking and when designing their new buildings, but also when designing renovations. And we know that gypsum can play a big role in renovation works because of the characteristic of the product themselves. So this is very important. And to do so, we are working with the colleagues in DG Environment on the definition of sustainability criteria at buildings level. This is the initiative on levels, so that is very well known to many of you that have been part of that exercise, working with us at the definition of those sustainability criteria, and of course ensuring coherence between the level of material and then the level of building. And then, of course, we go at the level of deconstruction, which has been mentioned already, crucial, not only to ensure the quality of the disassembling afterwards, so the quality of the recycled material that results from the deconstruction work, and also to ensure that this is done in a proper way. Again, we've been working very much with you, Eurogypsum, also in the context of the protocol for the management of construction and demolition waste. This is a very good document, very detailed and very down to earth about defining the steps to really identify the materials and going in and ensuring actually high quality of recycling process that is crucial also to ensure the trust of the market towards this new somehow also materials that comes into the cycle. We also worked together on the on the audit for pre-demolition works, which also support at this stage support the dismantling and the deconstruction of the buildings that facilitate a high quality of recycling material afterwards. The revision of the targets set into the waste framework directive for the separate collection of construction and demolition waste are under the responsibility of my colleagues in DG Environment. We're working very closely with them for the revision of those objectives or those targets in 2025, and we will come out, of course, with a revised proposal on time. But we are discussing with the colleagues in DG Environment about the studies that we will launch together to support the revision. But as I said, it's important all the elements and the supporting policies of the regulation, of course, is crucial to focus and to trigger the changes. But at the same time, it is important also that we do have a business case and where companies do find themselves actually an interest in going circular. The overall objective, of course, is to not to move the environmental impact from one stage of the life cycle to another one, and that's why keeping the information on the characteristic of the product in a life cycle approach is very important. And the work that you have been doing already from this perspective, I think, is paving the way for more success. We, as I said at the beginning, all products, all the materials will have to play their role. Of course, there will be competition between the different materials, but the capacity that each one of those materials will ensure will have to reduce its own environmental impact will be more visible in the future, and will also make this comparison of the material more neutral. We do strongly believe in neutrality, let's say, when going into the material approach, because we know that the characteristics and the tradition of construction are very, very different across the member states, also very different across regions, and sometimes even local communities. And there will be a need for all materials. So the transformation and renovations are also very different from each other, and the management of space in urban realities would require, for instance, higher building and using the space already occupied by buildings in different ways. So materials are all needed to find different solutions to design the built environment and the sustainable built environment we want to build, to be in and to live together in the future. So thank you very much already for your working with us, and looking forward to continue cooperating, of course, on all this matter together. Thank you.
Thank you, Fulvia. You mentioned the business case. Of course, the business case is often created by the regulation. I'm conscious, for example, that the landfill directive 25 years ago, has driven the whole recycling agenda, and different countries, of course, have introduced different taxation or other regulatory measures to reduce the amount going to landfill as a result of that. Can I just ask you before we move on, just explain a bit more about the legislative process? I mean, what should the industry be looking out for? You mentioned proposal being made by the end of this year, but specific targets would have to be agreed with DG Environment, and that might not be till 2025. So what's coming this year, and what's, when effectively will targets be set for member states, which will drive the national agenda?
Targets for construction and demolition waste are included in the Waste Framework Directive, and as such will be revised, already included in the in the Waste Framework Directive, and will be revised in 2025. And we're working with the colleagues in DG Environment to set the basis for that revision. What I mentioned for this year is the proposal on the revised construction product regulation, which is a regulation about the internal market of construction product, but that is also based on a common, what we call it, a common technical language. So actually it defines the characteristics and the performance of the construction product. For the time being, the current regulation was focusing mainly on the characteristic of the physical and mechanical, let's say, characteristic of the product themselves. But with the revision, we will also focus on the environmental performance of the materials, including, for instance, the carbon footprint. It could be of the different construction product, but also the minimum content of recycling content of recycling content of the different construction product, in line with the announcement made in the Circular Economy Action Plan. So we're currently discussing internally and finalizing the proposal. This will be for the end of this year. So we will already put some pressure on the construction product manufacturers to improve the characteristics, and the race actually to the best to improve and to show the best performance in terms of environmental performance would start already on that basis.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, well, let's look at best practice. Can I ask Klaus Berg, who's the Director of Public Affairs with Saint-Gobain in Denmark and also Vice Chair of the Nordic Gypsum Forum. Can you indeed confirm that the Nordic countries are demonstrating best practice? Klaus.
Yes, thank you very much. I will try to do my best to explain what we are doing in the Nordics, and I will give you a real example from the Danish businesses during the last 18 months. I will go through the work of establishing a new partnership called Eurogypsum, founded in the summer of 2020 in Denmark. And it was initiated by the industry and one of the bigger waste handling companies back in 2019, where the initial discussion took place. And the background for this collaboration and partnership was actually, we realized the lack of recycled gypsum powder in the right quality suited for the manufacturing of new plasterboards in the Danish plasterboard plants. So we actually do have a very well-functioned marketplace in Denmark, with good collection, good processing, and also good collaboration between the waste handling companies and the industry. But initial investigations back in 2019 showed that a remarkable volume of plasterboard waste from building sites and waste handling stations were either exported for agricultural purposes or even sent for deposit. Even clean cut-offs from building sites were sent to deposit due to unclear local rules, or clean waste was blended with other fractions of building materials waste and sent for deposit. So this situation and further discussions led to the establishment of the Eurogypsum partnership with participation of the whole value chain from the industry organized in the Nordic Gypsum Forum and the major waste handling companies supplying the industry with recycled gypsum powder. And then the demolition contractors were included in this collaboration. So we started in January 2020 in an early common brainstorming workshop and drafted a project plan, which was developed during the spring of 2020. And then we established our Eurogypsum partnership in June last year. We defined three main objectives for the partnership. And one is as simple as creating and increasing the proportion of gypsum waste being processed into gypsum powder for recycling in production of new plasterboards. And second was actually to address and ensure the legal framework and conditions that could promote the recycling of gypsum waste for use in new products. And third was to ensure a kind of quality and traceability of the gypsum waste, so it could support the desire for increased recycling of industrial to industrial production. So since June last year, we have in the partnership developed 4 work packages addressing several specific topics. One was mapping the legal framework for circular economy and recycling when it comes to waste from building materials and buildings, but also gypsum waste from waste stations and waste collection systems. The second one was to develop and find out how to trace and document and even make a kind of certification of handling the gypsum waste. And the third was mapping the waste streams and volumes, find out what is really out there. And the last one was looking on the tendering rules and the criteria of the tender processes, as well as barriers for tender processes. So we have seen, fortunately, that the political agenda in Denmark on circularity and sustainability in buildings has proven that our initiative was well timed, because a lot of things has happened in Denmark during the last 2 years. Back in 2018, the government in Denmark decided on a strategy for circular economy with two specific proposals for the building industry. One was development of a sustainability class in our building codes, and another one was more specifically requirements for more selective demolition. Further on, the government established in November 2019 13 different climate partnerships across all businesses and industries in order to come up with specific proposals answering the climate challenges for the country, creating the foundation for a new political strategy. One of the partnerships was addressed to the building industry, and it came up with not less than 27 direct recommendations in March 2020, whereof the lack of natural resources was one, and improved recycling of building materials waste was another of the recommendations. And then the Danish climate law was agreed in June 2020, and this spring in March, the Danish strategy for sustainable construction was decided. So all in all, we see a very huge societal and political interest with a focus on climate change, sustainability, and circular economy, including recycling, etc. So back to our gypsum partnership, what did the project and the work packages bring us so far? With the work package 1 from the legal framework, we have mapped all relevant legislation for gypsum recycling. And it is actually covered by more than 6 different laws managed in 4 different ministries. So it's quite complex. And then we found out that we have both national rules, we have regional rules, and we have local rules from the local municipalities when it comes to waste handling and processing. And one problem, actually a major problem, is that gypsum is just a part of the all building materials waste, and there's no specific requirements set so far. And since the legal requirements on recycling of building materials are volume-based and dominated by concrete, bricks and mortar and steel, etc., and gypsum waste only counts for approximately 2 to 3% of the volume, there's no big attention paid to gypsum. So what to do? What we did is actually we have started the discussions with the relevant ministry and the authorities and arguing for a more value-based evaluation more than volume-based evaluation on building materials waste. And then we have started the discussions with the authorities on developing a more detailed version of this waste hierarchy we all know about. Looking more into the real recycling and looking more to closed loops recycling than open loops recycling. So defining more value-based part of the waste hierarchy in order to address the more valuable waste, building materials waste. So we are looking actually for gypsum to gypsum more than gypsum to other things like agricultural use. And secondly, we have looked on the local rules and also the taxes, local taxes on deposit, because they are the main driver for making this profitable to use more recycling. In the second work package about traceability and documentation, the industrial partners has now developed a common set of quality standards for the processed gypsum. So we actually have shared our insight from the industry, even though we are competitors. We have shared the insight and started defining a quality standards, so the waste handling companies actually know which kind of quality standards should we meet in order to sell our products to the industry. On the other side, the waste handling companies are in the process of developing methods for testing, for sorting and processing in order to, in their businesses, to clearly specify guidance to the contractors and demolishers and municipalities when it comes to the best kind of quality of waste fractions and conditions. It could be wet, dry, clean, mixed, polluted, clean, etc., etc. And third, the contractors are now working on suggesting specific rules of screening before demolishing and screening for volume and value. not only volume, but also value of gypsum waste. And last but not least, we have started the process of trying to create a kind of certificate proving that the gypsum waste from a demolition or municipality is actually going into a closed loop, becoming new plasterboards, addressing the building owners who will set those kind of standards for the sustainable building certification like DDNB or LEED, BREEAM, etc. In the work package 3, we have mapped the waste streams and volumes, and by collecting data from official public waste statistics, from own estimations, from interviews conducted by consulting partner, we have now estimated that in Denmark we generate around 140,000 tons waste from gypsum per year. And we know that the processed volume for plasterboard production was approximately 1/3 of that in 2020. So the potential we do see in the industry is actually doubling the tonnage of processed gypsum powder coming from waste. So that's quite tangible results. Then when it comes to the last work package...
Just ask you to come to an end, please, Klaus.
Sorry?
If you could wind up so we can have throw a few questions at you before we have to move on.
The last thing I was going to mention is actually the tendering rules for as barriers. And there we have started the collaboration with the municipality of Copenhagen. So Copenhagen City has actually created their own circular economy handbook, where they actually have a policy saying circularity is keeping materials in a natural and technical circles. And they're using gypsum as an example. And then they have specific requirements in their tenders, where they actually requires that there will be provided gypsum containers for closed and dry recycling of waste. So that's very specific. So, yes?
Well, Klaus, if I may, I'll just comment on what you've been saying, because I get a sense of frustration here, because here you have gypsum, here you have plasterboard, which is capable of being recycled completely, and,
Yes.
and yet even in Denmark you've mapped out all the different obstacles that lie in the way to achieving that. I'm conscious of if I don't wish to go into European north-south stereotypes, but you do wonder, if you're having to go do this in Copenhagen, in Denmark, can some of the other countries across Europe with perhaps less sophisticated administrative facilities, match that? I wonder, doesn't it come down to cost? I mean, for example, if there was a financial penalty on depositing plasterboard, with other construction waste, then that will encourage people to recycle, will it not?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And that's one of the points that we are addressing, because today, the way that the municipalities are allowed to price the deficit is unfortunately that they are not allowed to earn money. So they just have to cover the cost for deposit and handling the deposit. We are arguing that they actually should increase the cost of deposit in order to encourage the industry not to deposit, but to reuse and recycle. So there are some political tax rules locally which actually are in the way for developing this. So I really see the price of deposit as the main financial driver for expanding this.
Yeah. Klaus, I'm going to invite you back onto the panel later on.
Of course.
Fulvio, I know, has to leave us shortly. Can we just go to the European Commission for a last word? Just from what you've been hearing about, what they're trying to do in Denmark to make this difference. It's when you try and turn, there's no way in which the Commission can specify a similar procedure as mandatory upon every member state, is it? It's far too detailed.
It is far too detailed, and of course, as I said before, the realities are very different from each other. As also Xavier mentioned at the beginning, the availability of the raw material is also making a difference in the price and in the business case of the that support actually the recycling facility. But we would actually strongly support the let's say the progressive uptaking of sustainability performances as one of the criteria to identify a product. And I think this is a sort of turning point from the past, where actually only the functionality and the characteristics and the price of a product were considered. These parameters would also play a role when defining public tenders, of course, in public procurement, because this would also need to be designed in a way to drive for sustainability at the building level. And this is also what we're doing by defining guidelines for the public tenders to actually consider more and more these characteristics and the performance, not only at the initial stage, but also in the long-term consideration, also in considering the cost of maintenance and reparation, for instance, at the or characteristics of evolving characteristics of the material in time. Indeed, the fact that gypsum can be recycled almost 100% at the end of life is a specificity of this material. Many others have more difficulties at the end stage. And so although we cannot go in such a detailed, let's say, instructions, but we can actually support the ones and the companies and the materials that are investing in sustainability by making those characteristics more visible and ensuring that a fair comparison can be done across the materials and across the different products, making, as I said, visible the efforts that are made at the level of the product itself. I think what is also important is that we are really trying to increase the coherence across the different policy work streams. And for instance, when providing guidances to the member states about their national plans for resilience and recovery, we also recommended actually to really strongly think about recycling facilities for construction and demolition waste in particular, because we know that the localization of those treatment is particularly relevant for this waste, where of course the ratio between the volumes and the weight plays a particularly important role if compared with other waste streams that can be shipped in a more easy way. So we try really to use all the different tools we have at our disposal to promote and sustain and support the transition and the progressive uptaking of the sustainability concept all across the value chain.
Can I just ask before you leave? I mean,
yeah.
Chris has described a political environment in Denmark which is very supportive of the circular economy concept. But presumably when you go to the council, to all the member states, I mean, there isn't the same enthusiasm from every government, is there?
Not yet, but is increasing actually, and it's more. I would say that also having discussed very recently the batteries directive with the member states. What we see is that member states may need different levels and different ways of supporting the policies, but there is none objecting on the policy themselves. The common objectives are very shared, and all the member states are committed to the achievement of the overall objectives. It's more a question of finding the right tools and the right ways to support those policies that can be different from member states to member states and even from region to region. But the overall objectives, I would say, are really, really shared amongst the member states. And this is somehow new. Also, from the time you were discussing REACH with my Chris, you were discussing the chemical legislation with Guido Sacconi. That was my
yes, indeed.
I was assistant to him, so
yes,
I do
really okay.
But the time has changed.
Exploring ancient history here.
Indeed,
thank you very much.
The time I think and the perception has changed.
Javier and Klaus, you'll be joining us for the panel later. I'm not sure if you can stay, Fulvia, but if not, you know, our next session is all about, will be about the practicalities of this. So I hope you get the chance to watch the replay if you can't stay. But thank you very much indeed.
Thank you to you.
Can I turn now to Dr. Davide Tonini, who is the project officer with the JRC, that's the Joint Research Centre, the key advisor to the European Commission. He's coordinating work on construction waste. Obviously, this will be the basis really for setting recycling targets when the DG Environment that we've had reference to makes its contribution. Now, do we have Dr. Tonini?
Yes.
Good.
I'm
excellent.
here. Hello.
Thank you.
Good morning,
Hello.
everybody.
What can the industry do to help you?
Well, that's why I'm here. I prepared a presentation for that.
Please.
So, well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to the conference. And yeah, you already said it, but my name is Davide Tonini. I'm a policy officer, scientific policy officer at the JRC in Sevilla. And I support DG Environment and DG Grow on the circular economy policies, mainly in relation to waste management and recycling. We have different projects, and I think one of them is actually fitting the audience, or maybe interesting to the audience today, and that's the key element of my presentation. So I'm gonna share the screen now.
Okay.
See.
So behind the scenes, is Duncan having a problem? Okay.
You can't see my screen, right?
It appeared and then it's just gone, Davide. I'm happy to do it from my end if you like.
Yeah, I can't see my PowerPoint actually from Zoom. So yeah,
Okay,
do please share it.
We're not seeing it, Davide. So if Duncan, can you help us? Okay, right, Davide, it's on our screens now.
Yeah, yeah. So well, I will tell you when to move on. So please, yeah, this the project I'm introducing today is a project we are running together with DG Environment. It's about life cycle assessment and life cycle costing of construction and demolition waste management. Please move on. Yeah, move on again. Yeah, the policy scope is, as you might know, there is a revision coming of the Waste Framework Directive by 2024. And in this, the Commission shall consider the setting of preparing for use and recycling targets for construction and demolition waste and material-specific fractions. What are the material-specific fractions of construction and demolition waste? Many. Gypsum is one of them. There is also wood, there is plastic, there is insulation material, there is concrete, and many other materials that you can think of when you think about a building. To this end, the Commission shall submit a report to the Parliament and to the Council. The same phrasing appears in the Strategy for Sustainable Built Environment, where the Commission is called for an action to promote circularity throughout the life cycle of the buildings by, for example, considering the revision of material recovery targets set in the EU legislation for construction and demolition waste. Today, the targets, as you know, are on the bulk construction and demolition waste. What happens is that the people basically go for the recovery of the heaviest fractions that would easily meet the target. This is concrete and so forth, that easily make up 70% of the total waste, and this is the target, 70% material recovery, or 60, now I don't recall. The problem is that important fractions, but lightweight, such as wood and plastic, are not recycled. Please move on. So the project goal here is to provide environmental and techno-economic assessment to support policymaking in construction, for construction and demolition waste. In particular, our work should inform the Commission in considering measures. Among these measures, the inclusion, the setting of specific targets for the recycling, the preparation for use and recycling for construction and demolition waste, and material-specific fractions of the construction and demolition waste. So material-specific targets, in a way. We are looking whether this may make sense. The project starts in 2021, January, started then, and will end in spring 2022. Please move on. Yeah, we have, yeah, you can click on them, yep. So, well, we have different research questions that we will address. So you saw the overall project goal, but there are different questions we have. What is the composition of construction and demolition waste in Europe, present and future? Because to make future targets, we should know what is coming in the future in terms of material generated from the building. What are the current practices in terms of recycling recovery? For instance, is the backfilling reported correctly? There is a lot of backfilling reported today for construction and demolition waste. Is that backfilling or is that landfilling, perhaps? What are the drivers and barriers for an optimal management of construction and demolition waste? What are the best practices out there? Can we improve the management by setting, for example, recycling targets for the individual materials contained in construction and demolition waste? This goes back to my previous argumentation on the goals. Which materials should be prioritized? And what is the environmental improvement potential? Ultimately, we are interested in improving the environmental profile of the management of construction and demolition waste to reduce the footprint of the management and to recirculate the material. So what is the improvement potential? Do we have any improvement potential? And if so, how much? Especially in respect to climate change. Please move on. So the project development, we have a literature review on the composition of construction and demolition waste. Well, I should say this project has been shaped by the GRC, initiated by GRC and DG Environment, but has been outsourced to a consortium that is composed of Metabolic, a consultancy based in the Netherlands, DTU, Technical University of Denmark, that will run the LCA, and DTI, which is the Technologisk Institute in Denmark, which will run the stakeholder consultations and the collection of data. So we have different phases, as you see, and we are now at the point of data collection. Please click on the, if you click, yeah, we have a timeline. We are now at the phase of data collection. We have done a literature review, and we are going for collection of data. Then there will be a building stock modeling by Metabolic, then a preliminary LCA and LCC, life cycle costing by DTU, and then a final life cycle assessment and LCC and the finalization of the report next year. Please move on. Yeah, this is an important phase of the project, and I'm here also to try to reach out this audience because we are selecting what the relevant materials within construction and demolition waste are. Of course, you know, construction and demolition waste is a mix of different materials, and there is wood, there is paper, there is plastic, there is different forms of insulation, there is concrete, and we have to select 2 or 3 no more relevant fractions for this study. The limit is due to resource constraints, budget constraints, but also to the fact that we have seen from the literature review that there are different materials, but only a few of them are relevant in terms of quantity, in terms of CO2 savings and recyclability. So now it is the time we are, based on a multi-criteria, basically selecting the relevant material fractions, mainly based on the CO2 improvement we can get by recycling that material. Please move on. So what kind of data we're looking for? Material composition of buildings in different parts of Europe, life cycle data sets for recycling technologies for these individual materials. For instance, recycling of insulation material, recycling of wood, recycling of, well, in your case, gypsum may be a candidate material. Data on the quality of the material recycled. What is the functionality of the material when recycled? Is that comparable completely to virgin one-to-one, or is that of lower quality? And if so, how can we address quantitatively this lower quality? And the cost. We are also calculating the cost because we are interested in seeing whether we have increased cost in the management, of course, of the construction and demolition waste, for which eventual instruments might be considered or needed in order to make the transition happen. Particularly for, you know, when you have to demolish a building, you have two roads, you have two pathways. You have selective demolition, which is costly, and you have conventional demolition, which is not costly, which is not as costly as the selective. And this is a key point in our assessment. On top of the technologies, of course, also they have a cost, but mainly the costs here are in the demolition phase, from what we could see. Please move on. Yeah, so how you could, how the stakeholders here could contribute to this project. We have sent out already a survey to stakeholders that initially showed an interest in this project. I hope we included all the stakeholders we should have for the construction and demolition waste sector. But in any case, we're still in the process of collecting information. So I reported here the mails, the emails addresses where you should, if you have data or you're interested in contributing to this project, you can reach out to the consultants or the JRC. Through these two email addresses. In particular, the first is the consultant. Well, is the
Davide, if I may intervene, I'm sure you will take that information, and I'm sure Eurogypsum and Tristan will ensure that it's circulated to all members. Just what's the timescale for that? When is that information needed?
Yeah, this is the last slide anyway. Yeah, the information is needed by summer. So we are collecting the data now, and we would like to have it within August, let's say.
By the end of
September. End of August, yeah. Before would be preferable. I mean, we have a deadline end of June, but we're leaving the summer as a buffer.
And you're also asking for general information, but I mean, if you want some comparative information, especially, of course, with regard to gypsum, and comparative from one country to another, it might be best if you discuss with Eurogypsum how the information might be collated or obtained in a way which allows you to compare one country's performance with another.
We are not comparing countries. We are not interested really in the comparison between countries. We are dividing Europe into regions, just to get an idea of the type of buildings, because if you have Scandinavia, there is 20% of wood in a building, 30% of wood in a building, while in Italy there is 0.5% on average. So you cannot make Europe as an average in this kind of studies, because you get the wrong picture for the market of materials generated by demolishing a building. So we're dividing that, but then in the end, we are not interested in comparing countries, but rather in comparing management of the material. So what's the best management of, I mean, does it make sense that the Commission put a target on the recovery of gypsum, or put a target on the recovery of wood from a building? Let's say that you have to recover 70% of the wood in a building, or 70% of the gypsum in the building, on top of 70% of the total waste generated by a building demolition. This would be the kind of question.
And this sort of question is in the survey form that you've distributing?
No, this question is the question we want to answer. what we ask the stakeholders are information, data on, for instance, okay, how much are there, for instance, recovery practices in place for gypsum? If so, what are the processes involved, the technologies, what is the cost, and what is the quality of the material recycled? This is the kind of information we're looking for. And then the conclusions, your question will be answered by the overall assessment, I think.
Fine.
I mean, there is an LCA for that.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure Tristan from Eurogypsum and others will be in touch just to ensure that we're not missing anyone out of the people being consulted. Thank you, Davide. Dr. Tonini, thank you very much indeed. We're going to now explore some of the ways in which plasterboard can be recycled, and some of the issues will be coming up. So you're very welcome to stay with us or watch the repeat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Now, before we move on, we have a second poll, and I'm going to ask for that to be put on the screen now. And it's about, you know, what are the obstacles? You've heard a great many obstacles that would seem to be in the way of encouraging the recycling of plasterboard to the extent that is possible. So here's the poll, and notice the very bottom where there is an opportunity to write in some of your own suggestions and additions. So I'll leave that on the screen for half a minute or so. I hope this is long enough to read through and answer. And we're going to move now to looking at the technical aspects of recycling, just what can be accomplished. We know, you know, the theory is there. We can accomplish 100%, but achieving that in practice may be a rather different matter. So let me turn first of all to Raphael Gas, the Director of Recycling at Circularity in France, how do we put these ideas into practice? Raphael, please.
Good morning. I will share my screen. Is it okay?
That's perfect, thank you.
Okay, so my name is Raphael Gas. I'm director of the recycling activity of Surfing Group. Surfing Group is an independent group with 29 companies, founded in 1875 in France, with 2,500 employees and turnover 320 million euros. We operate in public works and environmental trade. I'm going to talk about collecting and sorting construction and demolition waste. And for the general context, since 1997, the collection of waste from building has been aiming at sorting and recycling the material. At first, just rubber, scrap metal, cardboard, because it's simple and profitable. Over the year, we had wood, plastic, film, PVC, plaster, window, insulation. The regulation have helped us with the ban of the burial of recyclable. The 70% target for recycling construction waste And the French law, I think you know, LTECV, in 2015 with the reduction of landfill capacity, less 50% in 2025 versus 2010. We create the plaster recycling industry in France in 2010. And specifically for the gypsum recycling and the evolution since 10 years, in 2010, 100% of recycling plaster come from our sorting chains. We begin with 0 ton, but we can say in 2010 we are sorted 5,000 tons, and in 2020 95% of gypsum waste collected is already sorted at source. The origins of gypsums came from demolition and construction and renovation for 50%, and community dumping for 50%. Over the past 2 years, there has been an acceleration in the development of gypsum recycling because landfill price rising sharply, operators and taxes, and more sensitivity from economic operators and public opinion. The sorting became justified. I'm sorry for my English, it's difficult for me, it's the first time. The remaining obstacle to have more plaster. Today, export of waste at very low price. In the south of Europe, for the south of France, it's possible to export waste in Spain, for example, at very low price. And the lack of competitiveness of recycled material versus raw material. Still a lot of mixed waste need to further sorting at source. It's necessary to change the practice. Need for high performance material preparation tool that provide quality control and guarantees to the user of recycled materials, and the asbestos risk or to reassure. For the asbestos, the first assessment is that all construction waste may be affected. There is no threshold to characterize waste polluted by asbestos, and for us, only existing threshold for the atmosphere of the workstation. So in our company, we decide our practice. We prohibit the presence of asbestos in received waste. For demolition site, we request for asbestos diagnosis. We practice air analysis at our site to detect and count asbestos fiber, to check the workstation of our employees, and random sampling and weekly analysis on a delivery that is isolated before processing. For for us, it's important to be sure that there is no asbestos in the recycled material sent to the industry, plaster industry. I go quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Thank you, Raphael.
It's not easy for me, but I know that Xavier could help me, and I answer this question.
Can I ask, Raphael, is there any public opinion encouraging the recycling of plasterboard? Do you have any pressure from any of your customers saying we want to do this, or are you taking your own initiatives here without any real support?
I'm not. I don't understand. So
I just wondered, is there any public pressure to encourage the recycling of gypsum?
No, it's not. It's not only a public pressure. In France, 10 years ago, the ban of landfill for plaster, for gypsum, helped us to sorting the gypsum of waste. And I think at the beginning, the company, recycling company, tried to improve the recycling of plasterboard and gypsum. Now everybody, public, are more sensibility. Mm-hmm. Yes. And Xavier, can you help me, please?
Yes, okay, Raphael. Yeah, just to say, Chris, to answer your question, that in France, in fact, as Raphael mentioned, one of the main drivers for more circularity on gypsum was the regulation on landfilling. In fact, when saying the ban of gypsum landfilling in France, it's not really right, because it has not been really enforced. So even if there is a regulation which has been set up, it was not really enforced. So anyway, there is this regulation. There is a lack of enforcement, but I will say that the main driver is really the interest of the market, and thus the interest of the industry. In the rest of the industry, because of decreasing the environmental impact of the materials, and going through more sustainable resources and so on.
Thank you.
More than public pressure.
I hear you. Right, join us later. Right, let us turn to Martin Hendricks, Managing Director Europe of Northwest Gypsum Recycling in the Netherlands. And I think, Martin, you can probably claim that your company has probably been recycling plasterboard longer than anyone.
If somebody would turn on the video for me, it would be nice, but let's see.
Well, we can hear you at least.
Yeah, that's already something. Duncan, I cannot click video because, there we go. See? Hold on. Hey, there we go. See? I was faster with the video than Duncan, so that's good. Shall I start my presentation?
Please do, Martin.
Okay, hold on. Let's hope you see this.
We can.
Very good. That's already a good start. Okay, yeah, to answer the first question, we have been recycling plasterboard since quite a while, since 38 years to be precise. Not myself, I'm only doing it since 16 years, but by the boldness of my hair, you can see that I've done it already a long time. I'm not going to talk about our company. That's not so interesting. I only wanted to throw in a few facts. One of these facts is the European volumes that we processed last year. Last year, we have done 270,000 tons over our 5 plants in Europe. As you can see on the right side, we got plants with Saint-Gobain, Siniet, and Knauf together. So basically with all the main players in the plasterboard industry in Europe, and of course also in North America. Xavier asked me to talk a little bit about, I think about interesting things about how I see the quality demands and the outlets in the mature markets. In this presentation, I do not want to speak about asbestos issues or technical parameters. We've done that a few times, so let's try to shake up the podium a little bit. When you look at the demands for a plasterboard plant, a wallboard plant, these are, in my point of view, the basic principles. So, basic principle number one: you can only make gypsum powder from gypsum waste. Makes sense, but it's an important line. Zero contamination is the norm. Simple, a plasterboard plant cannot accept any contamination. At least that's the norm. Next point, powder price. The price of recycled gypsum should be a fraction of the price of virgin material. Not half, not 20, not 30%, but a fraction. Really, really a small fraction. Waste should become an end product. So the end of waste status has to be fulfilled. So we cannot supply waste to a plasterboard plant. We have to supply a product to a plasterboard plant. Of course, there has to be asbestos-free guarantees, as my colleague from France, Raphael, explained. That's the principle how to do that in most countries and with most plasterboard plants. And I think a wallboard plant can mix up to 35% of virgin material with recycled gypsum. Now, why is this important? Because that's nice, but there is a real world challenge. And the real world challenge is there is contamination. There will be wood, there will be plastic, there will be metal, there will be some stones. And unfortunately, there will be some asbestos. And we have to deal with that for a plasterboard plant. Now, simple example, this is Germany. I specifically talk about Germany because that's one of the upcoming markets for plasterboard recycling. If you take all the plasterboard plants, the wallboard plants together, they consume about 3.2 million tons per year. So simply said, if you need 35% of recycled gypsum, you can supply just slightly over 1.1 million tons of recycled gypsum. Now, nobody when I speak to plasterboard plants, it's never good to use the word cement plants. However, I think it's also needed because something is changing in the mature markets. These are the basic principles for a cement plant to use recycled gypsum. You can only make cement from gypsum powder, which is relatively pure. Low grade is okay. Maximum 5% contamination is the norm. Powder price should be slightly lower than the price of virgin material. So they are willing to pay 80% of the price of synthetic gypsum or natural gypsum. Insertion of waste is okay. So meaning they do not have to have the end of waste status. They can accept a waste product. Simply said, plasterboard waste 170802, the European Waste Code, and then insert it into their plant. Unfortunately, the asbestos issue is much lower. Has to do with the calcination process of cement and the binding capacities. They have less an issue with asbestos. And the last thing is they can mix up to 100% of they can replace 100% of virgin material with recycled material, and that's a big thing. Now let's look at that same German country. These are the German cement plants. They produce about 60 million tons of cement per year. To make cement, you need about 5% gypsum. That means you need about 3 million tons. Now, let's take, at 50% recycled gypsum, you talk about 1.5 million tons that would be their need. When you talk about 100% recycled gypsum, they could consume up to 3 million tons. Yeah, what does that mean is that if you look at Germany, there is about a demand for wallboard plants, a theoretical demand of 1.1 million tons of recycled gypsum. The cement plants would need up to 3 million tons. Yeah, and unfortunately, there's about 600,000 tons available. So the market has changed in these mature markets. Now, what does that mean for recycling companies like us? Yeah, if we would go for cement supply, that would mean a higher profit for us, simply because the gate fee on the incoming side is the same, but we get more money on the end product. The process is much easier. You can have more paper in it. You can have more contamination in it. So it's an easy compete to others. I will come back with this negative scenario what I just drawn. What we believe as new as gypsum recycling, obviously, is that wallboard supply is the only option in the long term. What the wallboard industry should do is they have to secure their volumes. They have to find local loyal partners, not so much partners who can supply something, but you need partners that are loyal and that do see the option for the long term, where plasterboard recycling back cradle to cradle into wallboard is the only option. And you can do that you can do that with open pricing strategies, where there is a real fair balance between virgin material and recycled material. How much is it? How much is the material worth? How much can we, for what price, how much gypsum waste can we attract? And how much gypsum waste can we take away from the cement industry? Because that is going to be the key issues in the next years. You see that in Germany, you see that in Belgium, that this is starting, and the UK also, by the way. Of course, everybody knows plasterboard is 100% closed loop. That's on the other side of the table. You got the cement industry, which is gypsum use in cement, which is a form of downcycling. Or if you want to make it even worse, like in a Danish example, agricultural use, by the way, also in the Dutch example in Holland, yeah, agricultural use is even worse in this whole scenario. Unfortunately, within Europe, recycling is not defined as being closed loop recycling. Meaning, I do not expect that we should get help from the government, from the EU, for example, when it comes to promoting recycling. They will promote recycling, but they will not fight against downcycling. Simply said, for the European Union, for the legislators, it is fine if gypsum waste goes back into the cement, because that is still a form of recycling in their point of view. And we all know as plasterboard recyclers that it is downcycling, but I don't think the government will help us in the next 10 years. If you look at the mature market of Germany, there the government is helping us to stop landfilling or to stop exporting waste to the Czech Republic. But to ask them to prevent waste, to prevent powder to go to a cement plant is too far. That will take another 10 years before they will move on that scenario. But hey, we all know we should not break the loop. We should go for cradle to cradle recycling. So that's what we have to keep promoting, have to keep doing. And the only way to do it is to put these facts on the table with on the European Commission, and let's get there.
Martin, you touched the core subject of cost. You know, the biggest driver of all. I mean, and you said that the powder price should be a fraction of the virgin material. Is that possible?
Yeah, that has been, of course, reality over the last years, simply because the synthetic gypsum was available for a very reasonable price, let me say it like that. So where would there be a demand for recycled gypsum? Now you see synthetic gypsum is dwindling, so it's not available anymore. And then you will see that recycled gypsum becomes interesting. But you cannot say the product is getting the availability the need is higher. However, the price should be very low, because there you have the competition of the cement industry that is already paying more for their recycled gypsum.
Very, very interesting about that. Yeah, I hope we get back a chance to discuss that again. And I'm glad this is all being done virtually. Otherwise, we'd all be being covered in gypsum dust now from what's going on in your background.
Yes, I thought make a real life picture behind me. There is a question in the chat from Jörg Demnig. Yeah, he's right. There is a doubt how much million tons in Germany is produced of cement. I have the same figures, Jörg. It's 34 or 60. That's why I gambled between 50 and 100%. But it's more than the gypsum industry.
Thank you very much indeed. Let me turn now up to our last presenter, David Jorgens, Head of Minerals Materials at Remondis Southwest in Germany too. David, are you with us?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for the invitation to the meeting here, and hello to all attendees behind the equipment. Yes, as Remondis point of view, so we operate also a gypsum recycling plant in Germany, close to Zweibrücken in Rhineland-Palatinate. It's in the southwest of Germany. And the difference between us and maybe newest gypsum here is that we cover 3 areas of this nice picture that Xavier has also in his presentation. We as Remondis collect, sort at our own sites, or do this with some of our customers together. And we recycle at our own plant here in Zweibrücken, what you see behind me. And we sell also the recycled product to the market. And we are also a manufacturer over the Remondis production and Casea. We use our own product in for new gypsum products, for example. So yeah, this is the reason we collect, sort and sell, and we are also a manufacturer. This is the difference. And let me say something about the situation here in Germany. I can agree with some points from Martin and also from Raphael. We have in Germany a similar situation. Raphael told us that some amounts of the input material go to Spain, for example. And so Martin mentioned this also, that we have the situation, unfortunately, in Germany, that recyclable gypsum input material goes abroad across the border in, for example, utilization sites. So in Germany, we have rising landfill prices, this is what we could say, and an increasing demand for recycling gypsum because less FGD gypsum is available. We have therefore been able to significantly increase the input volume of our plant and also the sales quantity. Now we are processing approximately 40 to 45,000 tonnes per year in our plant, and the plant has a capacity of 75,000 tonnes. So this is a significant increasing during the last 1 year. This is what we see here in Germany. And so I can agree with Martin, but nevertheless, there is still a problem that we have. We have a distorted competition regarding the input material with pseudo-utilization projects and plants abroad, for example, with utilization or dismantling in the Czech Republic. I would be happy to elaborate on this because it is often not possible for us to compete with these low prices. Our recycling is more complex and cost intensive than the more simple utilization in the Czech Republic. And we as Remondis have located 3 points. that have a significant impact on the availability of recyclable gypsum waste in Germany, right? So we could say we need a tender at the tender preparation for deconstruction sites, the anchoring of recycling in the tenders for deconstruction sites. This would be very helpful. And regarding the selective deconstruction, what Raphael said, the sorting of the material already at the construction sites must be, we must have a better situation in Germany. During the last 1 to 2 years, we've got a better situation, but we have to improve this together with our partners. And we discussed this also with, for example, DM. This is one of the biggest drugstore operator in Europe. And so they are looking for a sustainable solution if they make renovating projects at their stores. So this would be a good partner for us at this point. And what we need as a third point is an even better control of the existing specifications by the authorities, the waste hierarchy, the waste shipment regulation, and something on that, that we look a little bit more at this point. We have started a project together with PricewaterhouseCoopers, the focus of which is an expert opinion that deals specifically with the volume outflow of recyclable gypsum waste into routes subordinate to recycling. For example, utilization or dismantling in neighboring countries. And over the past 1.5 years, we have spoken with various environmental ministries in Germany, in Bavaria, in Baden-Württemberg, in Rhineland-Palatinate, in Hessen, in North Rhine-Westphalia. And the authorities responsible for waste shipment were also included. And we presented our expert report there. And we were able to establish that the existing laws and regulations already stipulate that recycling is preferable to utilization and that the material must be collected separately. This is also seen as such by all authorities. But unfortunately, however, it is still the case that large quantities of potentially recyclable gypsum flow off into cross-border recovery operations, for example, to the Czech Republic. The report also makes concrete proposals on how the legal framework can be further tightened. We have seen that especially the authorities in Bavaria will look and control more at this problem. One example for a better regulation is the Waste Management Plan, Lab 3, Sector Plan 31 of the Netherlands, which stipulates that recyclable gypsum waste may not be sent for cross-border utilization or dismantling. Something like this would also be very, very useful for Germany and would bring the distorted competition between utilization in Czech Republic and recycling in Germany to an end. And in addition, a better control of the regulations at construction sites would be also important, and the anchoring of recycling in tenders, if this would become more common, is also very, very helpful.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm just listening to the points you're making here, and I'm going to throw a question at Tristan. He can answer it in his concluding remarks, which is, you know, I hear what you're saying and the suggestions for policy measures that could be introduced. I mean, I take it that Eurogypsum intends to put some proposals to the Commission to say this is what the industry needs if we're to ensure that the sort of level of recycling that is possible can come close to being achieved. Leave that to Tristan. Right. Okay. I don't know if we have a time at all. I think we have a few minutes for panel discussion. We've had a poll, of course. Duncan, are you able to assist us with the results of the second poll? Right, okay, on the screen. So cost, 56%, clearly. Any question, isn't it? Anything else there? Yep. Regulations, You know, I remember once going to a conference on environmental regulation, and as a parliamentarian, you got so used to industry coming forward and saying it didn't like regulation that was being proposed here, it didn't like that regulation. And here, there were people trying to drive forward new technologies to protect the environment, and they loved regulation. It created market opportunities for them. It drove their businesses forward. And I think that's reflected here in this poll too. Right, rather than make my comment, would any of our panel members like to comment on those conclusions?
I had one question to the speakers on this panel regarding the, you know, Rafael told about some volumes of gypsum waste going to Spain, crossing the borders and going to Spain, because in Spain the landfilling is very cheap. We have another example in Germany with gypsum waste going to Czech Republic. I thought that the regulation in Europe was banning the cross-border of waste when it's going to landfill, if it's not recycled. Is it so? Is it a problem of again a regulation which is not enforced, or is it a problem of? So how do you perceive this problem, and how do you think, for instance, in Germany, the government will solve this problem you have with the Czech Republic?
So yeah, thank you. The problem is that the transports that go abroad to the Czech Republic is green listed. Yeah, so it's a green listed transport, and we think we must look at the waste hierarchy that we say the same as in the Netherlands with this waste management plan. Material that could be recycled should not go in utilization projects abroad. Yeah, so and this must be controlled from the authorities. So this is yeah, it is. We could go deeper, much deeper in this detail, but I guess we have not enough time. It's a very topic that must be worked out from lawyers. So what is the possibility in Germany to work with the available regulations? So we have many available regulations that should avoid this transports, yeah, but it must be possible to control it. This is the thing.
Excuse me, we referred a lot to the construction industry, but what about the ordinary consumer? I mean, you know, a significant proportion of the total amount of plasterboard that goes into the waste stream for whatever purpose it comes from domestic use, presumably. And if I tear down the plasterboard in my daughter's bedroom, for example, here in the UK, it's really difficult to get rid of. I mean, I have to pay. It's the recycling centres often will not take it. I have to go to a special centre. I have to pay money to dispose of it. You know, there was a strong incentive to go and find a valley and just dump it. What regulations exist? I mean, we talked a lot about landfill, for example. In the UK, I'm told the gypsum waste has to be kept separate from biodegradable waste because of the risk of hydrogen sulfide being produced. I mean, is this the same in every country, or does every country have different rules over how plasterboard can be disposed of? Perhaps Martin.
Yeah.
You able to respond?
I will give it a try. Yeah, I think every country has completely different legislation. You will see that what you say in the UK, if you have as an end user, you bring it to a recycling center, they will separate it manually, and then they will bring it to us at one point. Where if you take a country like Belgium, Holland, or France, you have recycling centers, container parks, where you will have a container with plasterboard, and that material is, for us in most countries, clean enough to go directly to us. But the legislation there is not so clear, because it is that's why I gave a comment before that legislation cannot be the driver of your business. It has to be commercially viable, because else there will be always cowboys on the market, else there will be always methods of driving it around. When Xavier says, why are we transporting waste to the Czech Republic? Yeah, because it's useful use in the Czech Republic. They call the backfilling of a mine, they call it useful use. And that's why it's called recycling for them. When my colleague David from Germany says friendly that Holland has a good rule that plasterboard waste cannot go abroad when it's not recycled, reality is that Holland has determined that the agricultural use of plasterboard waste, simply said land spreading, is allowed in Holland since 2 years. So the legislation is completely unclear. And in my 16 years of New West gypsum recycling, I gave up on building business cases on government legislation. There is always a loophole, there is always a gap. And when you don't expect it, even the country where I live in now has determined that land spreading is a good option. Where in the UK, where you live, Chris, I fought for 10 years against land spreading, agricultural use of plasterboard. But hey, Holland started to do it again. So yeah. So legislation is not clear.
In the UK, I'm told that plasterboard is actually classified as hazardous.
Yes.
Which seems surprising to me, given you use gypsum in dentistry, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, is that the case in other countries too?
Not that I know of, but they did it. They classified it really strange in the UK. That's correct. But hey, it helped. It helped the transition from agricultural use, which was for sure 80% 10 years ago, and now it's only up north where there is not so much where there's not so much inhabitants. That's where you see that land spreading is still going on. But for the rest, the UK has made a transition from land spreading to recycling.
Thank you.
It's not. I don't think it's to be considered as hazardous. It has to be. It is considered as having an environmental impact through the leaching, but it's not classified as hazardous. It's still classified as non-hazardous.
Oh well,
it's an environmental impact which is improper to land cycling.
Well, think yourself lucky then. I mean, you mentioned leaching, but here in the, you know, I look at UK websites, and it warns of the danger of hydrogen sulfide. It says, you know, this gas can not only smells bad, it's poisonous, corrosive, inflammable. It can lead to convulsions, inability to breathe, unconsciousness, coma, and death. That's plasterboard for you.
No, this is why the regulation, the European regulation, is asking for, when you are landfilling this material, to landfilling it in monocells, not to mix it with organic waste.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, all. I'm sorry we haven't got more time to field questions, because there's plenty we could discuss. What's very clear to me from this discussion is, you know, the potential. The potential is just great for capturing so much more and recycling so much more. We've got to put in place the right regulatory and pricing mechanisms to make that commercially viable. So I'm going to hand over now to Tristan, who I think would like to say a few words by way of conclusion.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Yes, just a few takeaways. I mean, you've noticed some, you've mentioned some already, Chris. But boosting recycling is crucial for the gypsum raw material supply. I think with an evolving supply, evolving prices, with the phase out of FGD gypsum from coal power plants, we have a keen interest in boosting recycling. Numbers are progressing, but not as quickly as we would like, as Xavier put forward. There are a number of key obstacles that we perceive, and from the survey, we've seen costs and regulation are clearly the number two elements. They are linked to each other. I think it's a lot is about restricting the disposal of recyclable waste. Legal aspects, sorting aspects are also very important. The presence of dangerous substances in demolition waste. And here we've heard from effective measures taken by the sector to reduce, to address this and make sure that there is no contamination. But still, here we would welcome some legal certainty on how to detect and acceptable levels or thresholds. How can we improve the situation and make sure that recycling is further boosted? I think we need to find solutions that are economic. That was also a clear message from Martin. Concrete solutions are proposed to improve the sorting. We've seen a lot of examples here today. We've heard also the need for a life cycle approach and to keep the closed loop model, so to avoid downcycling. And I think also we agree we need to further build our knowledge. There is still a gap about our knowledge on the volumes that are really available from all sources. So I think there are some actions here to be done. What could help also from a legal point of view, promoting demand. I think Fulvia Raffaele mentioned some of the initiatives taken already at EU level with the renovation wave for buildings, some public procurement rules. We heard also from initiatives in Denmark that could help promoting the demand for more circular products, more sustainable products for buildings. But it's also about promoting the offer, making sure the offer is sustainable. We've heard also about recycled content being considered in the revision of the construction products regulation. The end of waste status could also help us. There is a revision of the waste targets with possibly material specific targets on construction and demolition waste. So these are a lot of legal initiatives that could be helpful or could be providing solutions. And asbestos still remains an issue for all demolition waste that is reprocessed. Transformational changes are important. I think we've made a lot of progress over the past years, but still more needs to be done on putting the emphasis on deconstruction, using the works achieved with the levels program at EU level or the circular economy principles for buildings. And we need also to avoid non-circular options. And here I mean with enforcement of the rules on landfill, it's quite important. Finding ways of avoiding what I would call waste evasion to countries with more relaxed landfill rules. Finding higher costs for the disposal or possibly bans. I think these are some elements of reflections we need to look at and also to share with the European Commission and other EU institutions. So these were a few takeaways on my side. We will now put that also in a written form and also welcome any comments, any input we've got. I'm conscious we couldn't answer all the questions that were channeled by the audience due to the time pressure. So we'll make sure we reflect on those as well and we integrate into our summary report. Now I'd like to thank our speakers very much for their time, their involvement, their enthusiasm and dynamism in this field. I'd like to thank our moderator and all attendees for this great event. And my thanks also go to the team in the background, Anita, Duncan and John. And just to repeat, the materials will be made available shortly on the Eurogypsum website, eurogypsum.org. That will include copies of the presentations and video of this event. And as I said, a summary contribution of the contributions. I'd like to call also for continued cooperation with the supply chain, with the institutions. Perhaps we could further enlarge this forum to other actors that are relevant for this discussion. I'll welcome your thoughts from you attendees, what could be helpful to make these forums more useful for everyone in the future. So thanks again, everyone. I look forward to welcoming you again soon in a webinar or hopefully also in presence to discuss recycling, circular issues, and also other topical issues of relevance to our sector. So stay tuned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Tristan.